Hi, Pete's fans. Welcome to another episode of For Pete's Sake, your weekly podcast on everything Peterborough Pete's. I am your co-host, Josh Reeser. As always, is my co-host, twin brother, and encyclopedia of OHL knowledge, Matt Reeser. And it looks like we may have another co-host this week, our loyal Pete's dog and Pyrenees Tucker is in the room with us. So if you hear some clippy clopping or maybe some whining, it is Tucker, who is a passionate Pete's fan and is upset that they have yet to win a game, but is very hopeful that good things are around the corner. So he will be joining us as a guest host this week, and we are excited to have him, aren't we, Tucker? Yes, we are. It's a good boy. All right, well, on today's show, we recap another week of Pete's hockey. Unfortunately, Pete's are still searching for their first win. We are now 14 games into the season. It was another two very tight games. Could have gone the Pete's way, but did not. We will have all the recap and analysis of those games. As always, we will have our thoughts, what could have gone better, what is looking like signs of improvement, and where we think they go from here. We will also, as always, have our 3 stars of the week. Even when the Pete's are losing, the boys are trying, and there are some standouts. We want to recognize some solid efforts, and there certainly were some things to praise. We are also this week very, very excited to share another interview with you guys. We had the opportunity to chat with former Pete's GM, Jeff Twohey, currently actually a scout with the latest Stanley Cup winning Florida Panthers. And it was a great interview filled with lots of stories from his days with the Pete's. I won't spoil it for you till we get to that portion, but all I'll say is quite a journey to where he's gotten. He worked hard for everything he has. Certainly a great hockey mind and a very entertaining video. So we will bring that to you about partway through this podcast. After that, we will go around the OHL. We have some news and notes from around the league. And then we will highlight another busy week for the Pete's. Hopefully one that sees them bank some wins, get some confidence, and get that ship moving in the right direction. So without further ado, we are going to get started. And we are going to start it off with some Pete's praise, some good news. The Peterborough Pete's, if you're looking ahead to the end of the season, the NHL draft, 3 Peterborough Pete's have been included in the preliminary rankings. Caden Taylor and Carson Cameron are all ranked in the 3 to 4 round area. Aiden Young was also ranked a little bit lower on the scale, a 6th to 7th rounder, but there is time for each and every one of those players to rise up the rankings, as well as other players that weren't mentioned. I'm thinking maybe a Nico Addy could jump into that list, depending on how the rest of the season goes. Good on all those players. You can see what each of them brings and why each of them would be attractive to an NHL team. You look at Caden Taylor, his offensive skills are just outstanding. He's continuing to work on the rest of his overall game, and I think we're seeing him make strides this year, which is definitely going to bring more, make him more noticeable. But he's one of those guys, I don't know if you agree, the Pete's had a couple shootouts lately, and when Caden Taylor's in a shootout, like I'm the most confident I've been in years that he's going to have a very good attempt, if not score, because he's just got that offensive pedigree about him. Carson Cameron, right from day one, he's been a very good two-way defenseman.
Defenseman of the year in his rookie season.
Yeah, exactly. Defenseman of the year, like Matt said, as a rookie. He's just kept it going. And Aiden Young is one of my favorite Pete's to watch. He's just so elusive. He's got great high-end hands, hockey IQ, a little bit undersized, which I think kind of hurts him. Not his fault, obviously. It's genetics, and he could grow. A lot of players do, and I think he will add size and muscle as he gets bigger. But that probably does hurt him a little bit. But I think out of the three, he's got the best hands. He's a great playmaker, and as we saw last week with that hat trick, can finish as well. So he's a guy that might rise up a bit. Potentially all three of them could rise. I think the Pete's obviously not winning yet has definitely hurt them as well. You see a lot of teams want to draft players with a winning pedigree, and the Pete's can't say that this year so far. So the Pete's get on a bit of a roll. Maybe those guys, the stats follow, and they go up the NHL rankings. Sorry, excuse me. Fighting a bit of a cold here, so if you do hear me stuffed up or cough, I hope you guys have remained healthy and sick-free. I have not. But just your thoughts on that. Were you surprised at the positioning of any of those players? Do you think they could have been higher? Do you think anyone else should have been added? What was your thoughts on those preliminary rankings, Matt?
I think it's fair.
Yeah.
I think that it's where they are in the standings. You
Yeah.
see a few more wins, or I know they haven't put up a massive amount of points, but those guys are usually on the score sheet if the Pete's have a goal.
Yeah, it's true.
So, and you're seeing when they've scored lately, it's those guys who have like either scored or have the primary or secondary assist.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Carson Cameron was one I saw, like a before the season ranking from Bob McKenzie, and they had a mock draft, again, before the season started, and he was selected 32nd or so, which would be second round. So I think he has the potential to go that high, and maybe he will. I think, like I said, I think it's the record has hurt them. It's hurt their stats, and so we'll see. We'll keep an eye on them. But shout out to all those guys for being mentioned in the first place. Well, let's move on to the games that were played. The Pete's did have 2 games, 2 close games. Maddie is going to take us through them, starting with the first game, which was against the Niagara Ice Dogs. How did the Pete's fare in that one?
Yeah, so the Pete's did lose both these games, but again, they could have gone either way. You start with the Niagara game on a Tuesday night. Ice Dogs came out with a 2-1 shootout win here, but the Pete's matched them the entire game. They were stopping their offensive talent in the neutral zone. They got a lot of turnovers that went the other way. Their goal was actually off a turnover that Adam Levesque stole from a Niagara player, moved it up the ice to Addy. Addy went over to Faulkner, and Faulkner gets his first career OHL goal. So congrats to Faulkner on that, but again, it shows you their commitment to the neutral zone and the defensive zone. There were so many plays in this one where guys were blocking shots, getting in lanes, moving the puck up. Their defense were finding forwards out of their zone. I thought they just really, really, really did a great job of, matching a team that was number 1 in the East when they played them. I think they're still tied or first in the East, and they're the highest scoring team, and they held Niagara to 1 goal over 60 minutes. And they had Niagara, I think, a little bit intimidated in this one. I know Bowen made 44 saves, and he was spectacular again in this one, but the Pete's threw over 30 shots on the net as well. And a lot of the shots for Niagara were from the outside because they were pushing them outside.
Yeah.
And there wasn't rebounds. Bowen was controlling them, but the Pete's defense was blocking guys out of the crease.
Yep.
And they stayed disciplined in this one, and they got up. So they drew penalties in overtime, which is hard to do, but they drew 2 of them. Had a 5-on-3 in overtime, and you thought this might be the winner here. They hit a post.
It was just too little time as well. The 5-on-3 was great, but it was with 20 seconds left.
Yeah.
And I saw that, and I was just like, what if there was a minute left?
Yeah.
I think Pete's win.
Yeah.
So
Probably.
that's a tough one. That's a tough one that could have been.
Yeah. So then they used Taylor, Addy, and Malie in the shootout. None of them scored.
Yeah.
But Bowen only let 1 in out of the 3 shots. There were some good chances. But again, I think the best part of this game was the Pete's were very depleted up front. Mm-hmm. So you had McCallum and Pageau with injuries. Mm-hmm. Lefebvre was sick. Fitzgerald and Gowan were both away.
Yep.
And Bryant was still injured.
Right.
So you're missing, they had 9 forwards.
Yeah.
A lot of young forwards playing first line, like Parrish was on the first line.
Yeah.
And they still played shift for shift with the number one team in the East.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
come up with a point and lose 2-1.
Yeah,
So
very respectable effort.
yeah, and they could have won this easily.
Yeah.
So I love the effort, and I think this is, there's moral victories, and you can only have so many, and you got to put wins in. But I think this one you can count as a moral victory based on the lineup and based on the level that this team played to with such a young roster.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on that one.
Absolutely. Agree.
And then they go to Kingston on Friday. They lose this one 4-3 again. Another tight game. The Petes have found themselves in a lot of tight games. We'll talk about that in a second. But Peterborough fought back from 1-0, 2-1, and 3-2 deficits in this one. So their compete to get back in the game is there.
Yep.
They scored 2 power play goals in this one off 5 opportunities, which is great to see. Ryder McIntyre would score both of those power play goals. One of them, though, was Carson Cameron blocked a shot that was going to go down the ice and set him up, which was nice to see. It looked a little more fluid, the power play, which is always nice because sometimes it doesn't this year, unfortunately.
Yep.
And Caden Taylor would get on the score sheet off a nice fortuitous bounce that came right off the boards, and the goalie wasn't expecting it. He put it in, but it was like 7 seconds after Kingston scored to go up 3-2. So
good response.
They responded well.
Absolutely.
And then a goal in the final 5 minutes was a difference. Kingston had a point shot that was a bullet, went through and in, and then the Petes they pulled the goalie, but they couldn't really generate a lot of offense in that last kind of minute and 40 seconds. They had 6 guys on. And the Kingston did outshoot the Petes, but they only got 31 shots. So you're seeing more of a commitment to the defensive end, letting less shots through. And 20 of those shots actually came in one period for Kingston.
Yeah.
So that's 11 shots in the other 2 periods. So you held the team to below 10 shots in 2 periods.
Yep.
If you do the average of that.
Yep. Yeah, it's honestly, to me, it just seems like, again, like the Petes are playing well, and there's just a crucial moment that doesn't go their way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was late in the game in this Kingston one, and a late goal hurts.
Yeah.
Late goals in the final minute of the game, especially, but even in the final 5, it's just deflating.
Yeah.
You get scored on, you're behind, suddenly you start pressing because there's not a lot of time, and next thing you know, it's another loss, and unfortunately, not even a point. I think the resiliency, like you said, coming back 3 times showed a lot of heart.
Yeah.
I think they deserved at least a point in that game, but again, at the crucial time, Kingston scored and the Petes couldn't quite get it done.
Yeah.
Which has kind of been a theme for the Petes this year. Not quite enough of a stretch of strong play.
Yeah. And the one that got Kingston up 3-2 was a 5-on-3.
Exactly.
That the guy just got back on the ice from killing the 5-on-3 portion, and then they scored while he was coming into the play.
Yeah.
But it was 2 penalties they shouldn't really have taken. One was a cross check in front of the net that wasn't really something they should have done, and that to put them down 2 men, and then it's hard to kill off a 5-on-3, especially with Kingston's talent.
For sure.
So you play the top team in the other division and the top team right now in our division, Kingston, and you walk away and feel like you could have beat both of them.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I mean,
you're getting better. 7-2, then 6-4, now 4-3.
Yeah.
So you're getting better consistently.
Trending in the right direction.
So
Yep.
That's my thoughts on
and
that.
the effort's there. The effort's there for sure. Well, overall, I mean, I think there's good and bad.
Yeah.
I'll start with the bad, and then we'll work our way towards the positives. I think they're at a point where the games are becoming must wins if they want to see postseason. I don't know if it's tough to say because there's that saying, I've mentioned it on a couple episodes before. You can't make the playoffs in the start of the season, but you can take yourself out of it.
Yeah.
We saw it last year with Windsor, just off to that dreadful start, and then they actually had a decent second half after the trade deadline. But it was too far gone, and they ended up not making the playoffs. The Petes are 10 points now out of 9th.
11 out of 8th.
11th out of 8th in their conference. So there is time left. It's 14 games into the season, but you can only say that for so long.
Yeah.
We're into November now. Moral victories, like Matt mentioned a couple minutes ago, are great. Young guys' progression, confidence, all those things are good, but it's a results-driven business, and the results haven't been there. So I as much as I love saying the moral victories are there, and they certainly are, we do need to get some results soon and turn this around, for the sake of the confidence in the boys, for the sake of the fans. They want to see some wins as well, and if there's any shot of postseason hockey, which still in my mind, I know it seems like maybe a pipe dream at this point. You get on a bit of a heater, and it's not impossible. So I don't know if you agree. I'm starting to label these, as early as this week, some must-win games for the psyche of the team and for any sort of season beyond the regular season. I don't know if you agree to that.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at. But anyways, on a more positive note, because we are optimists and we support the boys no matter what, the flip side of that is Pete's have played 14 games. They're 0-11-3. 8 of those games, you could make an argument that the Pete's deserved a better fate, whether it was a point or a win. 5 of those games are 1-goal games. And then 2 more of those were empty net games, so it's essentially a 1-goal game. You pulled your goalie, the other team scored. If even a portion of those games, say
half.
You get half of those, you're suddenly not 10 points out of it, you're 4 or 5. And in a league like the OHL, you're going to play the teams ahead of you a lot of times. We haven't played the 67s yet. They're the team right in front of us. So you play a couple games against them and say you win 2. Suddenly you're like climbing back into it. So again, those are moral victories. It didn't happen that way. It seems like, when the Petes have a chance and they're this close, something just snatches it away. They need that full 60, and they certainly need to get on a roll. But the play has been there. They've been playing with good teams. They've been skating with some strong teams. They've shown moments where they're the much better team. That first period of North Bay sticks out still, where they were just flying around the battalion. So I do like what I'm seeing that way. I'm continuing to be positive. I think they continue playing this way, wins are going to come. I don't know whether, like I said, at this point, it'll be enough at the end of the season. I'm not willing to make that call yet. We'll certainly have to get on a streak, but I think wins are on the horizon. I like the way they're playing. It is certainly not a lack of effort, and it's certainly not boring hockey to watch by any means. They're in the games. Forwards, they're forcing a lot of turnovers. It's the way, this team under Rob Wilson has played. They forecheck, speed, size, hits. They're forcing a lot of turnovers. That's how they like to generate a lot of their offense. We're seeing that again. Lots of hustle. It's right from the leaders on the team, the Pages, the Malise, to the young guys, Nico Addies. I thought he's had a pretty strong season, like north to south hockey, using his size. To the rookies, you see it with Parrish. We've seen it with some of those young Fitzgerald, Levesque, all those guys buying in. And I think as a cohesive unit, that makes a big difference. Power play, that's one of the things that struggled. It's looked a little bit better recently. I think they're still finding what unit works. But the power play, the special teams, maybe that's a way they dig themselves out of some close games, as they capitalize on the power play and don't give up those short-handed goals, which has been an issue so far this season. Zach Bowen, exceeding my expectations so far. Not that I thought he was a poor goalie by any means, but he's been really good. He's got a lot of shots against him, and he's kept his team in most of the games. Like I said, there's moments where the other team is just gets a bounce or comes on strong enough just at the right time. But I wouldn't say too many goals have been weak, or any really of the games have been directly his fault. I would say none. I'd like to see Mason Johnson get a start.
Easton Rye's back up now.
Easton Rye is back. I like either of those guys, kind of just to give Zach Bowen a break. I don't want him to burn out. He's played a lot of hockey. To also see what we have, perhaps in one of the upcoming games. They got a busy week ahead. And the discipline has improved. It was an issue at the start. They were first and second kind of in the league to start the year, and their penalty kill wasn't great. They're now down to 11th in penalty minutes in the league. So they're not taking as many penalties, not shorthanded as much, and I think that can only help with the getting the guys going on 5-on-5.
Yeah.
So that's what I would like to say. I think there's still room for optimism with those close games. We do need to start winning sooner rather than later, and I hope it starts this week.
Yeah.
But keep your heads up, Pete's fans. Keep supporting those boys no matter what. They appreciate it. They can certainly feel it. The building's been rocking the last couple games. There was a tournament a couple of weeks ago with the young kids there, and when it's loud, the boys feed off it. You can just tell. So keep supporting them through thick and thin. We love our Pete's.
Yeah. And I'd encourage you, if you're a Pete's fan, to go back to any game sheet from the first 14 games, is it?
Yeah.
And look at our first and second year players' points compared to the other teams, because those will be our third and fourth year players next year when their third, fourth year players from other teams have graduated or moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And we win the points battle almost every game by a far margin.
Yeah.
So you can see exactly what we're building and where we're going to be when that changes.
Yep.
And we could get there this year. I'm just saying, just keep that in mind, that this is building for something probably more for next year and the year after, when these guys are the upper echelon third, fourth year overage players.
Yep.
That's when we're going to take off. And we might start this year, we don't know, but just I would encourage you to take a look and you'll get a good scope of what this team is and can be.
For sure. And the last thing, injuries.
Yeah.
We've had injuries. We've had suspensions. I don't think there's a single game the Pete's have had their full roster. We started without Strohack for a couple of games due to a suspension. Then we lost McCollum. Page's been out for a bit. Those are huge parts of the team. Malie was suspended. We saw Lefebvre suspended. So due to suspensions and injuries, I think Jenkin, the new defenseman,
didn't get to play the preseason.
Exactly. He missed parts of the preseason. So we haven't seen the full team together yet, so that plays a piece as well. Like Matt said, young guys stepping up, which can only help them in the near future.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, shall we
the 3 stars of the
move on to the 3 stars?
Yeah.
Because there were certainly some standouts. So who you got for 3 stars there, Matty?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with Ryder McIntyre.
Yep.
I think he's been vastly improved since they added Bryant. He's always been a good player, but he's taken his game to another level. He's blocking shots. He's scoring goals again. His game is really coming together. So for me, he's the 1st star this week.
Yep.
Great on the bench too. You can tell him he's talking to the younger guys, getting them going. Always good to have a former captain to help Malie a lot with these guys too. And he's always in there in the scrums, pulling guys away from the younger guys, making sure that they feel like they can play their game. So shout out to McIntyre this week for the 1st star selection. Number 2, I'm going with Faulkner because he scored his first OHL goal, but also with that depleted lineup, people have to step up. And in this game, he was beating out icings. He was breaking up odd man rushes. Maximum
effort from that guy, full time. Nice to see him get rewarded.
Yeah, so just his game was incredible. He blocked a huge shot that kind of kept the game tied against Niagara. Even against Kingston, he looked good. So for me, Faulkner is the number 2 star of the week.
Yep.
And then number 3 for me is Caden Taylor. He might not score as much as some people think, but he always is on the score sheet with an assist if he's not on there with a goal. He got a goal and an assist in the Kingston game, and he's their number 1 option on the power play. And when they pull the goalie, they want to get him open, they want to get a shot off. You can see how lethal it is. And for a player in his 2nd year, he's only going to keep getting better, and his commitment to the defensive end and in the neutral zone has just been way better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, Caden Taylor gets a shout out for all the things that he's improved on and continues to do well for this team.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, shall we update our teddy bear count as well? That game is fast approaching. It is December 5th. The Pete's had 5 more goals this week, That brings our total up to, what do we got?
31.
31 bears. How is your collection going for the 31
Good.
bears?
I'm ready to throw some bears and double that or triple that with some Pete's wins, hopefully.
Absolutely. Let's light the lamp and let's just make the bears rain.
Yeah. And I think we should do a week challenge where every goal this week is 2 bears.
Every two, okay.
Four game week.
4-game week.
Every
All
goal
right.
is 2 bears.
Let's issue it. Let's issue it. All right. Every goal this week is 2 bears for the Pete's. 4 games. Let's try and absolutely bust it wide open. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, anyways, we are excited now. We're going to take it to our interview. I had the chance to sit down with Jeff Twohey and chat. The interview did take place back in October. I believe it was October 18th. Yep. And it was an awesome interview from a big part of the Peterborough Pete's. 17 years as the GM, various roles with the organization before that, and is now in the NHL as a scout. He spent some time with the Arizona Coyotes, and he is now with the Florida Panthers as an amateur scout. So we will take you to that interview. I hope you enjoy. Hi fans, we have a special interview for you today with Jeff Twohey, who spent, I believe, he might correct me on this, I think it's 30 years in the Pete's organization, 17 of which were GM, and he had started out as a scout. He spent some time as the trainer, so he was with the organization for quite a few years and had some great success there, some OHL championships back in the early 90s and also as well in that 2005-2006 season. Since gone on to do some scouting in the NHL with some different clubs. And we may have to ask you 1 or 2 questions about your time with the Oshawa Generals.
Yeah,
I know you were you took over the rival Generals, and we won't fixate on that. But
you did have story though, Josh. So
you did have some success there as well. So thanks again, Jeff, for joining to do this, joining in. And you were, I started as a Pete's fan as early as I can remember. I'm an early 90s kid. So you were the architect of those teams that kind of pulled me in and made me a Pete's fan. So thanks for that right off the bat. And I interviewed Brent Tully recently, and he had nothing but good things to say to you as an assistant coach and as a GM. And so I know you're well regarded around the Pete's.
Yeah,
so
that makes me feel a little old, Josh, because I remember watching Brent when he was like 15 or 16 years old. And tell you just a quick story. You may get a kick out of relative to Brent.
Sure.
That year, we started the year in Brent's draft year. He was playing for I guess at the time they were called the Bantams, the AAA team. And he was eligible for the draft. And it was a year we started with 3 goaltenders. We had Todd Boysoon, Andrew Werner, and John Tanner. And the goal was ultimately to move John Tanner. And Dick Todd, who was a coach and GM, I was the assistant. Dick was with the World Juniors. And, he kind of put me in charge of making the trade. And we traded John to the London Knights for a 2nd-round pick, which was significant at the time. And John was a good goaltender. Obviously, the guy that we made the deal with in London was Wayne Maxner. And I remember about a month after we made the trade, I was at a game watching the minor Pete's play with Brent. And Wayne Maxner was there. And I remember he came over and he was like, the SOB, now I know where you're using that extra 2nd-round pick. And he was right. And on that draft, we were very fortunate. We got Brent and we got Jordy Kinnear in the 2nd round. Jordy's now the head coach of our American League team with the Panthers. He's in Charlotte. So,
oh wow!
Whenever I hear, I see Brent quite often, but I always think of that story. So it was a really good trade, obviously, and we used the pick wisely on Brent.
Absolutely, that is awesome. That's funny how it all worked out, and
Wayne Maxner saw it coming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they predicted it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back even further, your days as earliest days as a as a kid growing up, were you, a sports fan in general? Were you a hockey fan specifically? And then in terms of, playing sports, what did you grow up? What were your go-tos?
Well, growing up, like in my day, Josh, everybody played hockey, and I grew up in Lindsay and played hockey there. Very passionate, loved to play. Um, we actually, for a small town, we had two or three guys on our team that went on to play in the OHL, including John Bukaboom, who was a first round pick to the Petes.
Mm-hmm.
In my draft year, I got hurt, and my season ended at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know whether I probably wouldn't have got drafted anyways, but I thought I was going to. And so that's kind of what got me into scouting. And I started in Tier 2 when I was 18 with the Aurora Tigers of the Provincial Junior A League. But growing up, I played competitive fastball for a long time. And then ultimately, when I was, I guess, about 15, I started working hockey schools. I started at Bobby Orr. He had a school up in Aurelia. I started there. And then fortunate, I was an original member or staff with Roger Nielsen's hockey school when he started it up, and I was there for, I don't know, 25 summers, I think. But that kind of took me away a little bit from sports. But initially, my sports were or fastball, I guess, and hockey, like
Mm-hmm.
everybody my era. And then obviously we go to high school, played some football too. But hockey was always my passion.
Right on. Yeah. So you're hurt. I guess you said you transitioned to being a scout. Your story, for anyone who doesn't know, is an incredible. Just you deciding, I want to work in this industry, and I'm gonna do what it takes to make it happen. It's really inspiring. And I guess you started scouting when you were, was it before you were even in Laurentian's sports management program, or was it around the same time?
No, I started in high school, Josh, with
Wow.
again the Aurora Tigers. I was 18, and I remember I wrote letters to every Tier 2 team, every Junior B team, and I said, I work hockey schools all summer. I'm kind of connected, and
Yeah.
and only one team got back to me, and it was the Aurora Tigers. And I remember the GM and the assistant GM drove out to Lindsay to meet me, and I was like, hey, I'm still learning, but I'll work. And
Yeah.
they gave me a chance, and I became very connected with Aurora there. And then when I went to university, the Petes didn't have anybody up in Sudbury where I was in school, and I reached out to Dave Dryden, who had just been hired, and said, "Hey, you don't even have to pay me, but I'm going to games." And Dave Dryden gave me a chance, and with the Petes, and then it was Dick Todd that really gave me a chance to grow. And when I graduated, I had all kinds of opportunities. It was different back then. You could you could get jobs, not necessarily in sports, but in the business world, I had two or three pretty good offers, but really just wanted to work in sports, and I didn't know what I was going to
Mhm.
do. And then out of the blue, Dick called me in the summer and said the trainer had quit. Did I want
Mhm.
to become the trainer? And back then you could do it. You can't do it now. I had no
I,
training. I mean, I
yeah.
taught myself basically, and learned about injuries and sharpening skates and everything. But it really immersed me in a day to day with the team. And I lived with Jacques Martin, who had started full time as well. We lived in Roger Nielsen's cottage on the lake, and we worked all day. And then him and I scouted at night. So even though I was a trainer, I was heavily involved in the scouting right from day one,
Mhm.
um, which was kind of unique at the time. Most trainers weren't doing that, and it obviously called for some long hours. But for me, it was what I wanted to do, and never seemed like a burden, and just kept kind of growing under Dick to the point, with all my hockey school experience, I became an assistant coach with Dick, and then ultimately assistant coach and GM. So, and then ultimately, I guess, to general manager. But obviously, it didn't come easy. You had to put the time in, but to me, it really wasn't that difficult because I was passionate about it. I knew what I wanted to do and loved doing it. And
Mhm.
I wasn't married initially, and then obviously I got married. So I'm fortunate. I've got a wife that is very understanding, and I
Mhm.
have daughters that grew up around it. So I'm fortunate that it's worked out so far. Anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, your story, like you just alluded to, you kind of just, reached out, said, where can I help? And that's quite inspiring to just, know what you want and make it happen. Nothing was handed to you. You went out and looked for opportunities, and you talked about, learning on the job, learning to be a trainer on the job. I'm sure there was, bits and pieces to learn a bit along the way about, moving into a GM role and coaching. Have you always been a quick learner? Have you always been someone who's been able to, self teach? I imagine it's a bit intimidating to go in, with no experience. And how did you manage to pick it up so quick?
Well, I was fortunate because Dick Todd had been a trainer as well. So, he showed me the basics of sharpening skates. So, and then I used to work on it, Josh. Like I'd go down there at night when nobody was around. We had old skates that had been left over and, practice, learned how to take blades off, change blades on the skates. And also I was smart enough to know what I didn't know. Like I never pretended to be a doctor. So if there's ever anything that, was out of my, expertise, you always bring a doctor in, and
maybe Dr. Reeser.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But, I was lucky too. I had a good friend of mine that was very much a sports. He was a chiropractor, very much into athletics and sports. And he taught me a lot about taping, how to tape ankles, how to tape. So I practiced a lot in the summer so that when I went in, it wasn't that overwhelming. But back then you're young and, I was just glad to be there. And I, putting the time in and wanting to be good at it was the thing that really drove me because, I didn't want players thinking they had, less than, a quality trainer. So I fooled them initially. And then I think I got good at it by the end. But, you're still scouting too. And,
for sure.
Even when I was scouting, when I was in university, I didn't have a car.
Right.
So I was hitchhiking to games, I was taking buses, but
Wow.
never really thought it was a big deal because it's what I wanted to do. And I just felt fortunate to be able to do it. And so, it wasn't easy. But again, when you're passionate about something, and I think I was doing it for the right reasons, there was no ego involved. I mean, if I had an ego, I wouldn't have been the trainer and, mopping floors and doing laundry when nobody was around. But just, I was passionate about being around it. And I was lucky because, I was around Dick Todd all the time. I was around Roger Nielsen all the time. So, I was learning and observing so that, when I had a chance to coach, I think I was ready. I coached obviously with Dick Todd, one of the best junior coaches of all time. And I think I added something to help him. And then, when I became the manager, I'd been around it enough that really nothing was too overwhelming. I knew what to expect right from the start. So, it's been a bit of a journey, but again, if you're passionate about something, it's not that difficult.
For sure. Yeah, you touched on it there. I heard you didn't have a car when you were initially up north going to games. You said you hitchhike, you bust.
Yeah.
Was there any, making it just before game time stories or anything where you weren't quite sure you were going to get home after the game? Like,
you'd be some of those cold nights up north, and there was a few moments there that you look back on it now, you're like, I can't kind of believe I did that stuff. But again, when you're young and you're starting out, you just figure you'll find a way to make it work, and for the most part, I did.
Yeah. So then, as you continue on in a scout or as a scout, you've been now having 30 years with the Petes, and then a couple more with the Generals, and then some of the NHL. Now, what's you've probably been around to many places in both the CHL. I don't know if you've done NCAA or whatever, but do you have any favorite rinks or atmospheres that you've traveled to and you're just like, this is a hockey experience here? I don't know if you get to take it quite in as much as a fan versus a scout because you're there with a bit more of an agenda perhaps, but any places that jump out.
Well, I'd never watched NCAA hockey until I started working in the NHL. And, the first time you go to the University of Michigan and see a game there, or Michigan State, or, some of those places, just the enthusiasm, the fans is really something. And really, I was fortunate. I was with Arizona for 7 years, and basically, Tim Bernhardt and I were in charge of the scouting, and I saw the world. I mean, I was in every European country.
Oh,
The
wow.
one that sticks out the most is Russia. I spent 10 days in Russia there a few years. I don't know what year it was, 16 or 17, I guess. And, that was probably my least favorite place to be. The arenas are beautiful. Like I was in industrial cities, Chelyabinsk and Magnitogorsk. They're not exactly nice places, and it's a very stressful. You don't want to lose your passport or
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it, going to Switzerland and seeing games there, a beautiful country, going to places in remote Finland, that you've never been. So very fortunate. Czech Republic, Slovakia, all of those places I've been. And a lot of those places are places you wouldn't normally go as a tourist. I mean, you're not going to pick
Yeah.
up and take a summer vacation in Russia,
Right.
but just to have seen it, I feel very fortunate. But in terms of the OHL or some of the junior rinks, I still, as strange as it may seem, I still really enjoy going to some of the older rinks. Like Sudbury is still a favorite. There's so
Yep.
much history there.
Yeah.
Obviously the Memorial Center. Every time I go in there, I still get I don't know if goosebumps is the word, but I go in and I know the history there, and I know who came through there, and the history of the team, and it's well, put it this way, Josh. There was many times when I was with the Petes. At the end of the day, the rink, and this sounds really corny, but it happened. The rink could be empty, everybody be gone, and I'd be working late or whatever. And before I'd go, I just go sit up in the stands. I just go sit and look at the rink,
Yeah.
and I'd look and I go like, that's where Roger Nielsen coached, or, that's where I coached with Dick Todd, or, guys like Gary Green coached the Petes, Mike Keenan, or you even look at the opposition bench and some of the coaches that have come through there, like, Brian Kilray, Wayne Maxner, like just, so I don't think the history of any team was lost on me, but particularly the Petes. And, so it's still a favorite rink. Sudbury's a rink I really enjoy. Even Kitchener, like it's been very much modified, but it's an older historic building. So I do like the older buildings just because I'm a history guy and I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was able to chat with Pete Dalladay a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. And very similar thing. He said that, there's something just about those old nostalgic rinks and the rinks that are modernized today, they're unbelievable in terms of facilities, but a lot of them, they're more cookie cutter than perhaps, rinks back in the day where they each had their own charm, and they're each their own bit of nostalgia. And so hoping that, as more and more new rinks pop up, you got to maintain them for sure, but that you keep that charm and that uniqueness. It's part of what makes the different communities such a unique hockey experience. So it's neat to hear you say that as well. And it's very cool.
I know the history, Josh. I know, when you go into some of those older buildings, the history, and some of the newer buildings are beautiful, but they haven't had a chance yet to build a history. So
for sure.
It's not as significant. It's going to come, like, I mean, one of the best situations is Oshawa. I mean, the building, to this day is really, second. It's second to very few. And, having spent a couple years there, you could really appreciate the building and some of the amenities that it offered. So, it's a good spot too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a beautiful rink. I don't ever cheer for the Generals. I don't know if I could get there, but I've been down there for a couple games, and I've been there for concerts as well. And it is a nice facility. I'll give it its mention for sure.
Good.
Yeah. So when you're scouting, is it common there's a time you're going to, scout a certain player or a certain number of players, and there's someone else that just blows you away that you didn't anticipate going there to see? Is that a common occurrence, would you say? Is there an example, you're allowed to give me where that jumps out where you say, I was going to scout, it doesn't matter who it was, but and then this player that I hadn't really, even heard of, or I hadn't envisioned being a big part of our organization, jumped off the page, and they ended up being part of the plans.
Well, I think, yeah. And I think, Josh, when you scout, you have to be very open minded.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just go in thinking I'm zeroing in on one guy and one guy only because you're shortchanging yourself. But also, part of scouting is working, and you have to be out. And there when I was in junior and still to this day, there's not a lot of nights that I'm home because if there's
Mm-hmm.
games, I go. And like you can't find players if you're not at games.
Right.
So if you go to enough games and you're open minded, ultimately you'll fall into players. And I think I've told the story many times, but one of my favorites is Sean Thornton, who we had in
Mm-hmm.
Peterborough, and it's been I've told it many times, and I'll tell it again. But just because I was at a tournament in Gatineau, Quebec, and any scouts that were there left, and I stayed right. I wanted to stay right to the last game, but I had to sit through a game, and that's where I saw Sean. And there's nobody in the building, and he got in a fight, and really came to my attention, and I'd never heard of him, you know and then I finished out the day, but it stayed in my head, and we ultimately drafted Sean in the ninth round, and he's got 3 Stanley Cups. But the point is, if you're not out, you're not going to come across these things. So you've got to be out, and secondly, you've got to be open minded.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you could be watching bad games, and the easiest thing in the world is just to say, there's no players here,
Right.
and shut your brain off. But if
Yeah.
you're open-minded and alert and working, ultimately you'll find players.
Yeah, for sure. For
And
sure.
I was always a big believer too, especially when I was in Peterborough, because the scouting world wasn't as dialed in as it is now. If you worked, you could find players.
Mm-hmm.
So like we drafted a guy like Jason Williams, who won a Stanley Cup in Detroit. We got him out of a junior D team.
Mm.
Like people didn't even know junior D existed,
Yeah.
Jason Cullimore won 2 Stanley Cups. We got him out of a junior C team. John Tanner out of junior C. So we used to try and go places that others didn't, and you could find players. So again, you had to work, you had to be open-minded, and if you were, chances are you would find someone.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the more famous, obviously, and recency bias with chatting with Brent Tully recently was you guys convincing Pronger, Chris
Yep.
Pronger, to come to Peterborough. Was that a big part of it too? Was finding these guys, and then if they're if they're a bit more high profile and have a lot of options, convincing them that Peterborough is the place to be. Was that something you were had to learn, or something you were able to kind of just naturally do? Or how do you convince a player to come to your roster?
Well, in that case, that was a really interesting story because, and Dick Todd deserves credit for drafting Chris, because that year, it was the 6th round where we took Chris, and all
Mm-hmm.
indications were he was going to school. His brother
Mm-hmm.
had gone to Bowling Green. Chris was going to go to Bowling Green, and he made it clear that he wasn't going to report. And I think it was the 6th round. Sault Ste. Marie had a couple of picks, and they took a player from Kingston who said he wasn't going to report. And to Dick's credit, he kind of said, well, it's starting now. So if we're going to grab somebody. So the Sioux's plan was to grab this kid from Kingston with 1 pick and then grab Chris Pronger with the next pick.
Mm-hmm.
And to Dick's credit, he took him with the pick in between, somewhere in between, with no thoughts that we were going to get him. We worked hard at it, obviously, but Brent Tully deserves a lot of credit too, because Brandon and Chris were roommates on the under 17 team at the summer tournament. And I think most importantly, Chris, when he went into that tournament, figured out he was better than everybody else. So he might as well get on with it and, go to Peterborough instead of prolonging it with another year of junior B. And so, and thankfully he did, because, probably one of the more impactful players that we ever brought into Peterborough.
Mm-hmm. Wow, very cool. Yeah, no, there's a bunch of stories of that, guys. You guys were able, you and Dick, you mentioned, who were able to convince guys to come to Peterborough, and they went on to great careers here. And I'm sure it's got to be very rewarding when you're able to see that whole process of a guy you scouted, then getting drafted or signed, and then making the squad, and then whether they go on, like you said. I imagine it must have been very rewarding to see a Jason Williams come through the Pete's organization, graduate, go play higher hockey. And then a guy like Cullimore, you mentioned, I imagine that's got to be a pretty awesome feeling of saying, I can remember back when I scouted that guy, and to see what, how they worked and they made it through. It's got to be very cool.
Well, I think that's what drives you, Josh. Like you certainly, at least I can't speak for who's in place there now with the Pete's, but I never got rich working there. Like you did it out of passion. I would have stayed there forever because I loved the Pete's and I loved, but there's been a couple like that were really rewarding. And one story that's interesting, and it's been told as well, but Zach Bogosian, Zach was playing at a prep school in Boston and nobody knew about him. And, we had built up a really good relationship with Bobby Orr, and Bobby was his agent, and he really liked how we dealt and looked after players. We didn't have all the bells and whistles or the big school packages, but Bobby always told me that he liked the fact that we cared about the players. And so out of the blue one day, he was in Peterborough watching, I think it was Steve Downey was a client of his as well. And he told me in between periods, he said, I got this young kid playing in Boston that I'd like you to take a look at, because if you like him, I'll make sure he comes. So I said, well, if Bobby Orr asked me to go to Boston, I'll go to Boston.
Yeah.
So I went to Boston, and Bobby, before I left, said to me, listen, when you get there, I'll be in Florida, so just take my condo. You can stay in my condo. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, and then his people said, like, Bobby wants you to take it, so take his condo. So I'm like, okay.
All
so
right, yeah.
I went down to Boston for a couple games, and I saw Zach play, and I was like, wow, this guy's really good. He's a good player. And we were picking, I think, 19th that year. We had a really good team. And so I went back and I told Bobby, I said, I really like him. Like, I said, would you mind if I drove to upstate New York to meet with his parents? And he said, no, you go and meet with them. So I went and met with Zach's parents, took them out for dinner, and we talked for 2 or 3 hours. And, I remember his mom was, I wouldn't say she was cold, but she was very cool with me. She wasn't really warm to the idea. And, I kind of confronted her on it. I said, like, I get a sense you're not really on side with this. And she said, well, now that you ask, you could draft him and you could trade him tomorrow. Like, I don't know where he's going to end up. And I said, well, no, in the OHL, I can give you a no trade. Like, I can't trade Zach without your permission. Mm-hmm. And their older boy had played tier 2 and been traded around a little bit. And as soon as she heard that, I remember she's like, oh, well, that's very different.
Yeah.
So, I said to them, I said, look, like, I'll commit to you right now. I'll take Zach in the first round. I could probably milk this because I don't know if many people are even aware of him. Nobody's been down to Boston, and have you talked to anybody? And they said, no, you're the only one. So I said, well, I'll commit to you in the first round if you'll commit back. And the next day, Josh's dad said, yeah, we're in. If you take him, he'll come. And through a relationship with Bobby Orr, and again, spending the time to meet with the parents ahead of time, it worked out really well. I mean, almost too well, because we only had him for 2 years, but he ended up being the 3rd overall pick in the NHL draft. So part of this business, Josh, is about relationships and how you conduct yourself and how you do business. And, through that, we were fortunate to have a really good relationship with Bobby Orr. We always got his clients. There was never any issues. But Zach Bogosian was a prime example.
Yeah.
And again, to your point, very rewarding when you see him go 3rd overall and, see the career he's had. He's a family man now. He's got 3 or 4 kids, I think. He's well over 1,000 games, I think, in the NHL.
Yeah.
So it's rewarding for sure. But it's also rewarding when you see players that, they go on to become teachers or police officers or just successful. And the most rewarding part is, and it doesn't happen to everybody, but knowing that they had a good experience in Peterborough. Mm-hmm. And again, that's not to say everybody did. I'm sure, I cut players, traded players. Not everybody left Peterborough happy. But the goal always was, let's make sure it's a good experience. And if they're not going to be NHL players, that they're going to be successful in other areas. And obviously many of them are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to, kind of a perfect segue there. I was going to mention next, sometimes, hockey's a business. there comes time you have to make those difficult decisions. You have to send a player down, cut them, trade them, even, get rid of staff and hire new staff. And
firing coaches. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's tough because you got a relationship with these guys, and with players, you might have, been with them, from day one, scouting, like you said, and met with their parents and like the player, but it's just not a fit, or coaches. And so how do you, go about that? Is that something that was, tricky to deal with? Is it something where everyone, is able to recognize it is a business and you kind of just go about it that way? Or how do you deliver the tough news in those situations?
Well, you just got to be honest. And, some players or coaches, whoever, accept it easier than others. I mean, obviously, there's been some players we've cut over the years that didn't handle it very well. And, I get it. They're young and, they were, committed. It didn't work out. But, and I think at the end of the day, Josh, it never was easy. If I knew I was trading a guy the next day, well, I wouldn't sleep the night before, and I always felt if it got to the point where I can just trade these kids like without any emotion, then I shouldn't be in this. If it's the NHL and they're making millions of dollars and they're men, that's a little different. These are kids. And so you have to take the responsibility seriously, but you also have a responsibility to the team. You have to do what's right. And, I hope for the most part, I never misled kids or, and I think over the years, Josh, I lost some kids because I wouldn't guarantee them anything. Because I would say, look, like I'm not smart enough to know 2 months from now, like 3 months, like I'm telling you, you're here and you should be here, but it's up to you, but some kids would be, well, if you can't guarantee me, I lost, I still remember clearly we drafted Jimmy Howard. I don't know if you remember Jimmy, but he was a longtime goaltender for the Detroit Red Wings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember we were out for lunch and he was committed basically to coming to us. And I said, Jimmy, like the one thing I'll tell you, if anything changes prior to exhibition games, I'll tell you. Like, I'm not going to put you into an exhibition game without, And he said, well, you think something's going to change? And I go, well, I don't know. I'm not that smart. Like, as long as you keep going like you're going, it shouldn't. Like, you're a high-end goaltender. I could sit here and guarantee everything and then, a month into the season backtrack and, or I can be honest. And I remember, that to this day, it was significant to me. Like Jimmy, I remember it kind of impacted him and he went back and then he ultimately got recruited by the program in Ann Arbor, the U.S. program. And then he went to University of Maine. But basically I had him and I probably could have reeled him in if I had been, I guess he would have been honest because he was a quality enough goalie, but I just never wanted to mislead kids. And I said, before you play an exhibition game, I know you have scholarship options. I will not take them away from you without making a full commitment to you. Yeah. And like, he's like, well, you're not going to do it now. And I'm like, well, I got to see you in camp, if you go home and do nothing all summer, then I'm going to have to take it away from you. So you do your part, I'll do mine. Yeah. But, so anyways, that was sometimes the downside of it as well. But I always felt you had to be honest with them. And if you were, then, they may regret what you said or what you had to do, but hopefully down the road, they respect that you were honest.
For sure. Absolutely. How was I'm curious, your hockey career in the management side, I guess, started kind of late 80s, I would say.
Well, I was always doing it, Josh. Like when I started with the Petes, really, there was Dick Todd, myself, we had a secretary, and Jacques Martin was the assistant coach, assistant GM, but he was supply teaching part-time as well. Right. So back then you did everything. So, I was a trainer, but I was selling ads, I was finding billets, I was in on everything Dick did in terms of trades. I was heavily involved in the draft. So formally, I became the GM in 1993, but I'd been the assistant GM. Even when I was a trainer, I was basically an assistant GM. I was part of everything. Right, yeah. And back then, that's the way it was. Staff was small. Everybody did everything. I did press notes. Walk in and there's press notes. They're all by me because nobody else was going to do it.
Yeah, so, jack of all trades.
Yeah, well, and when I was a GM, Josh, I could tell the staff, look at like, there's nothing you're going to do that I haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
I've sold ads, I've found billets, I've mopped floors, like I've
Yeah.
cleaned toilets,
Yeah.
I've done all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so, if there's a certain way I want it done, then, it's got to be done, but it's not coming from someone that hasn't done it himself.
For sure. Absolutely. So along the way, one of the biggest change, I'm sure there's lots of changes in your time in hockey, but one of them in particular, would be that social media, online presence, which I imagine, was maybe there, but not super, players weren't using it to the extent near that they are now, and that kind of progressed along the way. Did you find there was a big change in the way scouting and GMs had to navigate that landscape? Because you mentioned before, there's no replacement for just putting in the man hours and going and meeting with kids and watching kids live, but there's more avenues now to get video on them and maybe get stats and reach out in ways that are more virtual. So have you noticed a change in that regard as well? And has it hindered the sport at all? Has it helped in ways, or has it done a bit of both?
Well, I think a bit of both, Josh. Like, as from a scouting perspective, it certainly helped because you have access to a lot more information. I mean, early in my time in Peterborough, like there was no internet, there was no, you'd have a whole pile of schedules mailed to you, and then you would go to games hoping that the players were in. There was nobody telling you that guys were hurt or. When I started scouting, just to put in perspective, I mean, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have GPS. I didn't have satellite radio. It was road
Right.
maps and whatever channel I could pick up, and then I would phone my wife, collect from a payphone, tell her where I was. And to put it even in perspective, like when I got fired by the Petes in 2010, I had a good friend of mine was an agent in New York City. And he told me, he said, you got to get much more familiar with Twitter. I was like, I don't even know what Twitter is at that point, Well, now Twitter, X, whatever it's called, Instagram, all that stuff, it from a scouting perspective, it exposes you to a lot of information, some good, some bad. And obviously it makes the players much more vulnerable. I mean, they have to be much better educated. We used to meet with players and talk about, the right thing to do off the ice, on the ice, what you had to be aware of. But now whatever you put out there, as a player can come back on you. So, it's good and bad. Obviously I'm on it and, I use it for information. But the players are much more vulnerable now than they've ever been, for sure. And there's cameras everywhere, like you make any mistake off the ice, somebody's got it on camera. So
Right.
You have to be very careful, much more careful than you did in the early 80s. Stuff would get swept under the carpet that maybe shouldn't have been, but you could certainly get away with a lot more back then. There was no cameras, social media, so the players are much more vulnerable now. But again, from a scouting perspective, you're exposed to much more information. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a big difference? You've scouted at NHL level, you scouted OHL level. Is there a big difference between scouting players that are different ages like that? Like, you're scouting guys that have played, on in the CHL or NCAA or Europe. You have these, NHL ambitions and trajectories, and versus kids coming up through minor hockey that have OHL trajectories. Is it similar in that there's potential in both cases, and you're trying to still figure out who's going to fit and then mold that hockey player while they're with your program? Or are they more raw as a minor hockey player? Is there more pressure because you're scouting them as a paid organization? What are the differences kind of there?
Well, it's hard because like when you're in the OHL and the Western League's even tougher because they draft a year earlier, but you're drafting kids like, we look at kids as from an NHL perspective, guys that are eligible, and you say, well, he's physically immature yet, but when you're watching kids 2 years previous that are, playing under 16, they're even more physically immature.
Right.
So, trying to figure out where they can get to physically is much more difficult in junior than it is in the NHL. For example, when we drafted Eric Stahl, he was 5'11", 145 pounds. We didn't know he was going to grow to be 6'3", 200 or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
but he was well along that path when the NHL were watching him.
Yeah.
He had 2 years of growth. So that's part of it. The one thing that's a little easier for junior, I think, is that you can look at it two ways. And some teams in the OHL, they don't care about pro prospects. They just want to draft guys that are good juniors. And, in Peterborough, when I was there, we always wanted to draft what we considered would be NHL prospects, because early on in the early 80s, we didn't have any money there. And NHL money was crucial to us. And so we always wanted to draft guys that we thought had a chance at being pros. So in the NHL too, you have to look at it and say, is this player is a good player, but is his ability translatable to the next level? And chances are, if you're a smaller player, unless you're really dynamic, it's not translatable to the next level, especially if you're a smaller defenseman. You can be a really good junior and have a great career in the OHL, but you're never going to fit for us, because of the size and the speed of what it's like at the NHL level. So it's kind of a drawn out answer, Josh. I don't know if it's answered you or not, but I think the OHL, it's hard because they're young, but it's a little easier because you're not drafting for pro. You're drafting for junior. NHL is maybe a little easier because they're 2 years more physically developed than when they first come into the OHL. So you at least have an idea of what the body type's going to be down the road. But you have to have certain, like when I was in Peterborough and the same in Oshawa, I had a scouting handbook that I put together, and I just told our guys, this is what's crucial for the type of team we want to build. Yeah. So I made it easy for the scouts. I don't like small, I don't like slow, and I don't like soft.
Yeah.
So if you see any of those, you can eliminate them almost.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah. Yeah. So then when you're the GM of a club, you're putting a team together. Did you have you mentioned, some traits that you look for? You just mentioned some that you don't, obviously, but did you have a blueprint year after year that stayed, kind of the same, or did you find there was a lot of adaptation, particularly in the CHL where there's so much turnover because there's an age limit and a minimum requirement? Do you kind of have to assess where the team's at and adjust, or do you have, this is the team I'm looking for and I'm going to try and bring pieces in and out based on that?
Yeah, well, we always had to remember too, we were playing half our season in the Memorial Center. Yeah. Smaller confines. So, and I think we always had an identity, when I was in Peterborough anyways. We had a clear identity. Usually we were big, and we always had, it wasn't too often we got pushed around much. Like you can list a long list of hard, tough guys that came through Peterborough. But you also couldn't overlook skill. I mean, we drafted guys like Ryan Spooner, who wasn't overly big. He's the first 16-year-old to ever get 30 goals as a 16-year-old in the history of the Petes. Smaller guy, but we felt we had enough size and, toughness around him that we're fine. But, people always I'd be at games and other scouts would be, yep, I figured you'd be watching this guy because it's a big defenseman. Well, there's no secrets. I like big defensemen. And in Peterborough, we always had, our blue line was always big. When I went to Oshawa, the one thing I said to the owner there was, as long as I'm here, we'll never be soft, because you never win with soft, so I think we did have a blueprint. I think we adapted maybe slightly. You could not overlook skill, but as an identity, we wanted to be big and hard.
Yeah.
I never wanted teams coming into Peterborough. And listen, during all my time there, you can't say every year it worked out perfectly, but in general, I never wanted teams coming into Peterborough not a little bit on edge.
Right.
And I learned that watching Roger Nielsen when he coached. He had Stan Jonathan. He those guys are so crucial. And we had, we mentioned Sean Thornton, Matt Johnson, Ty Domi, Justin Soriel. I drafted Derek Mathers. So those guys, to me, they were character guys. They played with passion. They weren't afraid to step up. And in junior, that gives you an edge. So long-winded answer again, but yes, we had a blueprint, big, hard. Did we adapt? Yeah, slightly, because we didn't want to overlook high-end skill to fit into that general identity that we had. And Josh, at the end of the day, if you have high-end skill, but you have softness all around it, it's not going to be able to perform. But if you've got high-end skill with hard, tough guys around it, your skill guys are going to be a little more at ease.
Yeah.
And now, in saying all of that, the OHL has changed since I left. Fighting and physicality is not where it used to be. So if I was a general manager now, I would probably have to adapt more towards speed and skill, because now there's no repercussions for, you do whatever you want to do basically, and you can't really answer back. So I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but I think it's safe to say we did have an identity during my time there.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned it briefly. Again, 2 years in Oshawa as the GM. That opportunity comes up. Was there any backlash as being a Pete's employee for so long? Not that there should have been. You did nothing wrong except accept a job and you performed very well in Oshawa. But was there anything, such a hockey crazy community in Peterborough? Did you get any sort of criticism or comments?
No, because in all honesty, I think they were glad to see me go. I say that like I don't know. They just near the end, the last, 5-10 years, I don't know. Like I just never really. Well, anyways, I'll leave it at that. I think they were glad to see me go.
Yeah.
When I went to Oshawa, there was some trepidation there from the fans, but Josh, it changed quickly, because I remember we had a team barbecue, and a lot of the fans were asking me if I was commuting from Peterborough to Oshawa. I said, no, I bought a condo. And they said, well, where do you live? And I said, right across from the rink, right there.
Yeah. And
they said, you live in downtown Oshawa? I said, yeah. I mean, I always have my house in Peterborough. We never moved. Right. Peterborough's home. Yeah. But nobody had ever done that. Most people just commuted. And I never even thought of it at the time. Like I bought the condo because I wanted to, be immersed in the city. And it was really, it was kind of fulfilling. I guess it really meant a lot to those people. Like, you're living right in downtown Oshawa. And I'm like, yep. And I'm here. I'm a general, and was it weird when you put on a golf shirt with generals? Yeah. But the fans there were really good. They really accepted me and made me feel welcome. And we really enjoyed it there. Like we had some restaurants downtown that we liked. My wife would come in on the weekends, and it was good. It was unfortunate it didn't last. It was just a situation where I went back there. Pete DeBoer and Adam Graves were, they had a big part of that, owning that team, and with Rocco Tulio, and they were the ones that brought me back. And then the second year, they kind of sold most of their ownership to Rocco, and he just wanted to have a much bigger say in the day-to-day operation of the team, and making trades and everything, which was his right as an owner. But it wasn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate when I left Arizona. They told me I could always come back.
Yeah.
Which, I was like, everybody says that, but I don't know. And so when I reached out to them, they gave me a promotion. I went back, so it all worked out well. And I really enjoyed the 2 years in Oshawa. It was great, and the fans were good. We had good teams there. Ultimately, the year I left, they won the Memorial Cup, and so proud of those guys, because the culture there had really fallen off, and we did some things early on. One of the best things I did was hire DJ Smith as a coach, and it was really the first time that I'd ever been given carte blanche to hire whoever I wanted.
Right.
And but we did some things early because that team really needed a kick, and they found out pretty early, what was going to be required, and to see it ultimately, get the Memorial Cup, even though I wasn't part of it. Pretty proud of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, along the way, you've had success. You had some OHL titles with the Petes that, I can still remember that you guys sweeping the Oshawa Generals to win the OHL title. My twin brother, we mentioned this on a previous podcast. He called that. He said, "We're going to sweep London this year," and I
Wish
looked
you had
at
have
him
told me
like,
that.
I looked at him like he had three heads. I saw, I believe we have a strong team. I think we have a really good shot at winning, but sweeping London, they had Corey Perry
Yep.
and I was just like they're a strong team, and then he did, and I tried to get him to admit on our show, that he wasn't really convinced, and he had kind
Yep.
of just said it, but he's taking it with him and keeping it, whether he actually believed it or not. But
Yeah.
anyways, and then obviously, as recent as last year, you're with the Panthers, and you get, the organization wins the Stanley Cup. So, what is it? What does it take in your mind, to have it come all together and win? Because putting together a roster is just one part of it, and you can have personnel, but you look at the Boston Bruins a couple of years ago that had a record breaking season in the regular season and have maybe the best roster, and aren't able to claim that prize. So is there a couple X factors or something that you think just make a winning team a winning team?
Well, I think it's culture. You have to have leadership. And any team we ever had in Peterborough, I was part of 4 teams that won championships there, always had strong leadership. And it's hard to find, Josh, like
Mm-hmm.
legitimate leaders. And that's why it's so hard to win, because everybody says they're a leader. But when you have a legit leader, that can control a team, then you have a chance. And I'll give you an example. Like when I was in Oshawa, we had Josh Brown.
Mm.
And Josh he's in the NHL still. He's had a long career. He's a big defenseman. And,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was so hard on him when I first went there. Like, because I could see it in him, but he couldn't see it in himself. And, I finally, I think, broke him, and he started to come around and do things right. And he was in my office one day, and he was talking about somebody on the team that he was upset about because they were always late. And, I said to him, I said, well, Josh, if you want me to deal with it, I'll deal with it. But I said, I'll tell you one thing here. If I deal with it, we'll never win. I said, if you deal with it, if the team self polices,
Mm-hmm.
we can win.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh looked at me and he said, me? And I said, yeah. Like, you do everything right now. You figured it out. You work hard, you play hard, you're physical, you're tough, you're big, you've got presence. Nobody's going to argue with you. Why do you tolerate it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got through to that team, that, good teams police themselves. And so that's part of the X factor. So Josh became the captain there. He was a guy that hoisted the Memorial Cup when they won it.
Mm-hmm.
And he took those words and impacted the team. We had, I'll give you another example. Jordy Kinnear was a captain of our 1993 team. Like Chris Pronger was there, and it was Corey Stillman. We had a lot of good players, but Jordy was the captain, and I was the assistant coach. And Jordy and I are, to this day, we're still very close. Came to me one time right before the end of the season, and he said, this guy, and this guy broke curfew last night, and I'm the assistant coach, so I'm angry. And Jordy said to me, don't do anything. I'm just telling you, I'm going to deal with it. And he said, you don't need to tell like Dick Todd, I'll deal with it. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm just going to tell them if it happens again, I'll kill them in practice. And Jordy was so competitive that, that ended it. So you have to have that mentality. Good championship teams police themselves. They have a culture. They know what's expected. During my time in Oshawa, I told those guys, like, I'll work with you. I'm not going to be checking curfew and micromanaging you, but if you screw me, I'll lock it down. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
just work together. Let's make sure you have fun in the right way at the right time. We know what our priorities are. I'll treat you like men as long as you act like a man. You
Yeah.
want to be a boy, I'll treat you like a boy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of an X factor that you have to, if you don't have a leader that's going to take the ball, and you're as a general manager or coach constantly putting out fires, you'll never win. Got no
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah.
So,
Right on.
and I mean, again, I always want big, I want competitive, I want hardness, because the playoffs are a long grind, and we won in '06. We beat London, as you said, 4 straight. A big part of that was Steve Downey. It wasn't overly big, but like there wasn't too many guys tougher, meaner than him
Yeah.
that wanted to win more than him.
Right.
So those guys are hard to find.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to win, Josh, but everybody wants it easy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you
Absolutely.
look at even the Panthers winning. I mean, you had guys that were all banged up at the end. They just played through it. It doesn't matter the NHL, American League, wherever it is. You got to have guys that are hungry to win and aren't going to quit because they get a little bump or it gets hard. It's
For
easy to
sure.
quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why when you do win, it's an amazing feeling because you realize how hard it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it is. It comes down to, one team. That means every other team is not winning. And
Exactly.
you said it right there. Yeah, it is hard to win, and it takes buy-in from absolutely everyone. And you have to know what it takes, and further than that, be willing to do what it takes to win. And
Yep.
those are the organizations and teams that are successful. And
What,
it's
too? The other thing I'll tell you, Josh, that the one
yeah,
thing that in Oshawa in particular, DJ Smith and I were very, very close.
yeah,
And the players sense that.
hmm
They sense that there's unity from the top down. And I remember Cole Castles played for us in Oshawa, and he was sitting with me one time, and he said to me, "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen between
hmm
you and DJ." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "No, no, no, it's not. It's not. It's good." But he said, "I've never seen like a coach and GM on the same page. Like, I didn't interfere with DJ. He listened to my any suggestions I had. Some he agreed with, some he didn't.
hmm
And I listened to any suggestions he had. So we worked together, and players see that. You got to be genuine. You can't fool players, whether
for
you're a
sure.
coach, GM, whatever. They see everything.
Yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm out of like formal questions I came up with. This has been amazing. I really appreciate all the time and yeah, you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat hockey, and your story, like I mentioned, is just super inspiring. About you decided where you wanted to be, and you didn't give up. You just worked at it, and nothing was handed to you. Nothing was easy, and nothing was just given, like you said. So
Well, thank
that's a
God it worked
very
out, Josh, because I probably wasn't smart enough to do anything else. So thank God it worked out.
but you had that attitude of this is where I want to be, and nothing's gonna hold me back and stop me. And everything you've earned, you deserve. You're
Well,
a
I will
class
tell you
act
too.
and worked hard.
Well, I will tell you too, not to interrupt you, but like,
Yeah.
for me, like working for the Pete's for 30 years was very special. And,
Yes.
I got a Pete's tattoo on my arm. Like it,
Nice.
it meant so much to me to be there for 30 years. Every day I was just like, I'm so fortunate. I had options to leave here and there, but I just wanted to be a Pete forever.
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
so I'm not connected there now at all, but, obviously still pull for them from a distance anyways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks again. This has been very, very, very awesome to chat with you and hear your side of the story. And you're a very knowledgeable hockey guy, as evidenced by this chat. And I'm sure we could talk for days, but I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been great catching up and seeing you again. And maybe if you're doing some scouting down in Peter, maybe we'll see you around the rink sooner rather than later as well.
Sounds good, Josh. I'm there fairly regularly, but thanks for your interest as well. It's always good. I can, as you can tell by my long-winded answers, I can talk hockey anytime. So thanks for giving me
Absolutely.
the opportunity.
For sure. Well, thanks. We appreciate it again.
All right, my pleasure. Take care. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye now.
Well, thanks again, Jeff, for a great interview. It was an awesome, awesome opportunity to chat hockey with such a big part of the Pete's. And like I said, his story is just remarkable. He decided where he wanted to be, and he just worked his tail off, made his own luck, made his opportunities happen, and made himself a very, very, very vital part of the Petes for a long time, and now has worked his way into the NHL. So good on you, Jeff, and thanks again for taking the time to chat with us.
And winning follows him.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's won, at kind of each level he's been at. So thanks again, Jeff Twohey. All right, as we kind of wrap up our show here, we will go around the OHL. Matt here is going to bring some of the news and notes around the league, and then we will highlight a busy week, like I said, for the Peterborough Petes to end our show. So take us around the OHL, Matty.
Yeah, so Quinn Musty, who was sitting out, not reporting to Sudbury, he's been there a couple of weeks now, almost a month, decided to join back with the Sudbury Wolves. So he's back playing for the Sudbury Wolves, obviously, now. My prediction is he won't be there for the whole season.
Yeah.
I think he'll get traded. I think coming back's the right thing for him to do to get his game kind of going again.
And good on the Wolves.
Yeah, for sticking it to him and saying, come play.
Yeah, who knows if they're fielding calls. They probably were. And if you don't get a call that you think is value...
Yeah. Sit at home.
Yeah, don't make the trade.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt his development. I'm sure the Sharks weren't thrilled with him sitting out and not playing. So force his hand a bit. Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked. Prediction, he'll end up in Windsor by the end of the year.
Yeah, we're with a contender, you think? Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. And then the Eastern Conference this year, we've been talking about this a little bit, but it's so tight. Like it flip-flops every week. You'll see a team up top, and then like 2 and 3 and 4 will flip, and then another team will go on a winning streak. And that's why like the top to the 9th spot is like 4 points.
Right.
Like anyone in the East can beat anybody.
Yeah.
Like the Petes can even beat the top and the second team. We saw it this week.
Yeah.
Niagara's 1, Kingston's 2. Like Oshawa, Brantford, like Ottawa, like all these teams, the Steelheads, like there's all these teams. Barrie has gone on a run. Like everybody in the East is like got so much skill this year. It's like almost like you can't separate because every night you have to bring your A game, and if you don't, the 8th or 9th seed in the East could beat you.
Yeah.
Which is crazy when you think about it, because usually there's a divide of the top 4 teams.
Yeah.
But the Steelheads are sitting in like 7th or 8th.
Right. Yeah.
With probably the best lineup if you go by paper.
Yeah. There's no separation yet. Yeah, it's a win jumps you up a couple spots in the standings.
Yeah, because if you go out west, you've got like Windsor running away a little bit.
Yeah.
And Kitchener, who just
continues to win,
destroying everybody.
Yeah.
And then you've got like London, who's doing well, obviously, because they always do well, it seems.
Yeah.
But then like the bottom, you've got like Flint, Guelph, and Owen Sound, and Saginaw, who are kind of falling off a little bit.
Yeah.
Not completely out of it, but they're kind of, you can see it echelon of teams.
A bit of divide there. Yeah.
That's not happening in the East.
No.
So the East is just going to be a battle. Like the first round is going to be
fascinating.
Intense.
Yep.
Because you could potentially see the Steelheads and Niagara go at it in the first round.
Yeah, that would be quite something.
Yeah, and they've already had a goalie fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just something to keep an eye on. Usually you see a divide, but it's not happening right now. And then, like we said, Kitchener's won 9 games in a row.
Yeah,
I did not see that coming.
No, when they unloaded Rakoff and
who's in a better spot than them right now because they're winning.
I don't know.
And then they got all those draft picks for Rencroft.
Yeah.
So they have the tools to rebuild.
Yeah.
And they have all the draft picks.
Yeah.
So like,
it's quite awesome.
Who's to say if they want to load up, they have the arsenal.
Exactly. Yeah, they got to be pretty thrilled with what's going on there.
Yeah. And then London Knights 6-game winning streak. Since Cowan's come back, they've kind of turned it around. But Guelph Storm though have lost 9 in a row. So they're kind of tail spinning. They're kind of going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And then like Oshawa is just scoring at will right now. So like since Callum Ritchie came back.
Yeah.
And they've got him, Seneca, Barlow. Like you're seeing how dangerous Oshawa could be. But then again, we've played with Oshawa this year.
Right.
We scored 5 on them in their home rink.
Yeah.
With an empty netter, so technically a 6-5 game.
Yeah.
And the other one was 2-1.
Yeah.
So like
a lineup full of first round picks.
Yeah.
In the NHL.
Yeah.
Like it's wild, and we, like Matt said, we play right with them.
Yeah.
So
I don't know what to really make of who's gonna be the top echelon team in the East right now because there's so many teams competing. And like the Steelheads were like, I was at the start of the year, they were just exploding, beating teams.
Mm-hmm.
And now they like are struggling to be 500 every week.
Yep.
And they're getting like 3-0 leads on like teams and then losing.
Yep.
Like they got 3-0 on North Bay the other night and then went to overtime and won 5-4.
Mm-hmm.
North Bay's like 6th in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
But they're not playing like a 6th place team.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. That's absolutely crazy how tight, jam-packed it is.
Yeah.
And that plays into kind of the Pete's chances as well. You start winning, you start climbing quick in the East.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Having said that, we'll tee up this week and maybe the wins start coming.
A lot of teddy bears.
A lot of teddy bears. Like we said earlier, double the bears for every goal this week. Pete's, let's make us go out and buy some bears. Fill that net. We want to see it. All right, starting with another Tuesday night game. The Oshawa Generals return to the Memorial Center to play the Peterborough Petes. 4 of the last 6 games, they've scored 5 or more goals. Like Matt said, Callum Ritchie's back. Their offense is running. A very, very strong squad. I think it's 5 first-round picks or 4 at least.
Something like that.
Great power play. It's top 5 in the entire OHL. You'd expect that with the firepower they have. And they've won the previous 2 matchups against the Petes, albeit close game in the last one.
Yeah.
Petes generally come out pretty strong against their rivals, hoping for the same thing. And I hope they are motivated to give Oshawa a beating. I would love to see that. Yeah. Go out and support the boys on a Tuesday night. Absolutely fill that rink.
Yeah.
And then a Thursday game this week, but it is a rare road Thursday game. The Petes are making their Michigan Windsor trip this week. So the Petes will first head down to Saginaw to face the OHL and Memorial Cup winning Saginaw Spirit from last year. It is a Thursday game, like I said.
Didn't win the O last year.
Or sorry, not OHL winning, Memorial Cup winning. They were the host teams. Good catch, Matt. But they won the ultimate prize there. On Thursday, the Saginaw Spear, like we said, second last in that West Division. They're right around kind of the 500 mark. They have the leading scorer in entire OHL, Michael Misa, who's projected to be a high NHL pick this upcoming draft. Can score in bunches. And a bit of a they remind us a bit of how the Petes played last year, staying in the hunt due to kind of the experience of knowing how to win so recently. So we'll see how the Petes go up against a team with a pedigree of winning and some high-end talent. Then the Petes stay in Michigan and head to Flint on Friday. They are playing the Firebirds. The Firebirds like to play tight games. They have one of the top goalies in the league in Ethan Day. They've given up the fewest goals in the league, so it'll be a stingy game. And they've shown they can beat some upper echelon teams. They have actually beaten London, Kitchener, had a very close game with Windsor as well. They're coming off a tough week, which saw them score only 1 goal over the 3 games. So perhaps defense is more their bread and butter than offense, but a tight game as well. And they are also kind of in the bottom of that West Division. So,
which is shocking because they loaded up at the end of last season. They made all those trades for veterans and
exactly.
They wanted to be like Saginaw. So they just kind of haven't put it together yet.
Yeah, you're looking at the standings. Perhaps, some teams that aren't as confident as they should be. Maybe the Petes can strike on one of those Michigan teams. And then on the Sunday, the Petes cross back over into Canada, but are just over the border into Windsor to take on the Spitfires. Liam Greentree sitting second in the OHL in points. They're the highest scoring team in the OHL. Best power play in the league and the fewest goals given up. One of the fewest goals given up.
They're tied with Flint.
Tied with Flint. Wow. Okay. Wow. That's, so you get the most goals and give up the fewest. That's certainly going to be a recipe for winning. Their goaltender Joey Costanzo leading the league in goals against and save percentage. So they're getting contributions from up and down that roster. Look like a strong team this year, and kind of like we said, it's early, but they look like a team in the West to not take lightly at all. So I think it's a good time for a road trip. The Pete's, again, looking for that first win. It's a time when you can bond, you can come together as a team, work a bit on that culture. Maybe we see some of the new guys like Bryant come in and play. I haven't heard anything on him. I don't know if you have any updates.
They're saying McCollum should be back this week.
Perfect.
They're saying Bryant's maybe.
Yeah.
So they're hoping to get those guys in.
Yeah. Even if they're in and around the team, like you bring those guys together and bond over a road trip down into Michigan and into Western Ontario. So I think a good time for a road trip, and I think a good time for some wins. 4 games. I want to see at least 2, maybe 3. Yeah. I would love it.
And maybe this is a week where, because you have 4 overagers, you can keep a little bit fresher.
True. Yep. Run out some new lineups. Keep the legs going.
Because you're going to need it. In 3 games in 4 nights.
Yeah. We'll probably see some of the backup goalies. I think it's Rye now, like you said. Get a game or 2.
And you got a lot of D, right? So you can kind of interchange them in. You'll get Fitzgerald and Gowan back probably by the end of the week.
Yep.
They'll have played a lot of hockey, so you don't want to tire them out, but you can maybe get a fresh jump or a little bit of a boost there.
For sure.
So, again, bond over the weekend games and come out with some points.
To get our first wins.
And get some wins.
Absolutely. Maybe 4 of them. That would be quite something. I would take 4, but let's go. I'm calling it 2 wins out of the 4 this week. Hoping for more.
Yeah.
Saying 2. Starts with 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any predictions for you?
If we were playing London 4 times, it'd be 4 wins.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. All right.
Say at least 2.
2 wins as well.
Yeah.
I'd take that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have shown a better effort. They're getting stronger. They're getting healthier. Let's put it together and get back in the win column.
Absolutely. And I think it will happen. Some victories ahead. Let's head into December rolling. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
Anyways, that does it for us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed our recaps. We hope you enjoyed the Pete's games ahead, and we hope you enjoyed our chat with Jeff Twohey. Thanks again. As always, thanks for listening. You can find our podcast on our Facebook page. You can find it on Spotify if you search for Pete's Sake, on YouTube if you search for Pete's Sake, and we have all our info posted on Instagram at 4PTB Pete's Sake. And we'll post all our info there as well. Thank you to our listeners. Remember to support the boys, and I hope you guys stay healthy and warm as we head into a cold, wintry season. Thanks again, and as always, go Pete's, go!